The United Democratic Movement wants an investigation into the banking sector. It believes there's collusion to keep banking charges at a certain cost. The party's Nqaba-yomzi Kwankwa made the call after the Public Protector's recommendation that Absa pay back billions. He joins us now from our Cape Town studios. Mr. Kwankwa, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Why do you believe the banking sector ought to be probed?
Well, we took this decision as the United Democratic Movement after we picked up that, you'll remember recently the banking industry or some of the commercial banks were found guilty of having colluded in the manipulation of the currency. But my feelings and the feelings of the party go way back when I was still a person responsible for gathering competitor intelligence in the banking industry at the time. I raised this concern in particular when I picked up that the pricing structure for the various products and services that the banks offer are almost identical in various lines of their products. For an example, a typical example, how can you explain the fact that, for an example, if you look at Absa, if you were to withdraw money over the counter as an example, you would be charged 32 rands for the first 100, but you go to FNB, the same fee applies, and when you look at all the fees in their totality of banks, they are more or less the same and more or less very identical, which means if they could manipulate the currency and collude around something as complex as a currency, surely one of the most obvious places where banks would collude around would be the issue of bank charges, because to them the issue is one of taking out the price of the product as one of the factors that consumers have to consider before they change banks. It means they want people to make a more qualitative decision around the issues of service and other issues, accessibility of the bank, so that they rule out the possibility of people switching between banks. It does not just affect one product, it affects a number of products in the banking industry. Over the past 2.5 years or so, we have as a party been monitoring these trends and patterns where you see that even at times when they undertake their annual increases on fee structures, the fees remain more or less the same. Even the increases in some of their lines are more or less the same, even though the cost structures aren't the same. So we're saying once we're done with this exercise, I'm sure we'll start engaging with the Competition Commission to establish as to whether or not another full inquiry cannot be done in the banking industry to see whether or not there are no collusive tendencies as we pick them up by just taking a casual look at the pricing structures and the fee structures of the banks.
Well, we know in 2008, 2009, a probe took place over this issue of banking charges. They were found to be high, but little or nothing appears to have been done about that. Is it clear to you why nothing's happened?
That's precisely the point. I think at the time maybe there was no political will to address the matter. As a party, we are willing to take this matter up again with the Competition Commission, because I remember that exercise in 2008, and by then I was still part and parcel of the banking industry, by the way, and I was very consistent in raising these issues, and often the response I would get from my bosses at the time was that my responsibility over and above being a banker was to gather competitor intelligence, but not to question them on the decisions that we're making at the time, not to question them on decisions around the fee structures of these financial institutions. It makes no sense, for example, for one bank that has a big distribution channel to have the same cost structure as another bank that has a smaller distribution channel on a number of transaction fees and transaction charges that they charge clients. This obviously also extends to some of the unscrupulous conduct that you see when it comes to credit life insurance, where our people are given that insurance without even telling them, but as soon as they are retrenched, no one actually contacts them from the bank to say you can access credit life facility for that period while you're still looking for a job. You also have instances in the very same industry where the credit life insurance of clients, for example, they would activate it as soon as they're retrenched, but on the second month the banks would start hounding them to say you need to repay, even though the credit life insurance period is 6 months. I know this point in particular is addressed. It's one of the issues that the National Credit Act, the amendments that were made recently, seeks to address, but it means that we as legislators and people in general in South Africa need to be vigilant around this issue so that we stop being bullied and manipulated at times and by the commercial banks.
It's interesting, 17 local and international banks have recently been found to have colluded over supply and demand of the rand, and the Competition Commission clearly has been tough with them, but many of them receive a fine that's negligible. Is that really an effective punishment?
No, it's not. It's not. Remember, the most effective and easiest way of of dealing with that fine, I'm sure they'll just tweak one or two products, increase prices of one or two products, and pass that fine as a cost over to clients, and then recoup it again. People need to be arrested for collusive behavior because it really affects the South African economy. It hurts the poor the most. It hurts the economy in general, including the issue of bank charges. I remember also raising this matter in one of our debates in Parliament, saying we celebrated recently when we launched, a couple of years ago, when we launched the Mzansi account. It was launched with a lot of fanfare. But now if you go back to the very same financial institutions, the account does not really exist. They've opened a different account because the conditions that were placed on that account wanted people to remain poor. Right? You couldn't access, for example, your account, your money, if it exceeded such a lot of money, forgetting that the market that you're serving, for example, if you look at our market, you'd find that there are things we call rotating savings. In December, if you put in a lot of money in that account, it would be frozen. So it was not tailor-made for the poor. It was not really tailor-made for the industry it sought to serve. So these challenges, they need us to sit around the table and say, if industries or bosses in industries are found to have engaged in collusive behavior, someone must be arrested over and above the penalties that they pay, which they just pass over to consumers to pay the penalty at the end of the day.
Thank you so much for talking to us. The UDM's Nqaba-yomzi Kwankwa.